No.
All right, we'll just keep going. Dean, how many minutes do we have?
We're I don't think we have a limit, so
Oh, okay.
You're
Unlimited time.
That,
I have it
that's,
on. I have it
That's
11.
dangerous with a college professor, isn't it? No
that's
limit.
dangerous. So college professors have diarrhea of the mouth. I'll try to.
There may be people who are watching and listening who we will not see. That was one
Okay.
of the options that we gave people, and
No,
so I'm hoping that that is the case.
no problem. Well, anyway, hello.
Go ahead, Ken. Tell us your stories.
Well, hello to you all. When my cousin Ed and Marie Willoughby asked me to speak to you, I had severe reservations. Although I've given hundreds of presentations over the years, this is the first one by Zoom. And I much prefer to see you in person. But nevertheless, we've lived through a most unique year, and we have to adjust to reality. Hello, can you hear me?
yes.
Yes.
Am I
Yes.
loud? Am I loud
Yeah.
enough?
Yes.
Okay.
Clear as a bell.
If I'm not coming through, please interrupt, and I'll get closer to the mic, or maybe I'll yell louder. Anyway, our current situation is an inconvenience to us. I tell some people that 63 years ago, my wife and I decided to get married because we wanted to be together. Well, the past year we have been together. We have been out of the house. Well, I put a mask on to go to the grocery store and hardware. But anyway, the current situation is an inconvenience for us. It's nothing, however, like the sacrifice of physicians, nurses, maintenance people who work themselves to fatigue in hospitals, plus many others who are deemed essential workers, but are the lowest paid people in our society, like grocery store workers. That's not the subject for today, I understand, but I want to register my admiration for these heroes, and I hope that those on the lowest ranks of compensation will have their income increased to a fair compensation. In addition to acknowledging their heroic service, we should not overlook the danger to their own health and taking the virus home to their families. When you read an author or hear a speaker, it's good to know their background. From where are they coming? What is their baggage? We all have baggage. In order to understand what I will say, you need to know at least some of my baggage. I was raised on a dairy farm in southern Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. When you live on a dairy farm, you don't get far from home. Cows must be milked twice a day, every day, Christmas and July 4. Our lives centered around our cows and our church, the Mechanic Grove Church of the Brethren. I remember eating with my parents in a restaurant only once in my entire life. We stopped at a seafood restaurant on the way home from a one-day trip to the New Jersey beach. What a special day. One day after milking, we went 3.5 hours to the beach and came home that same day. What a vacation. That was the closest thing we ever came to a vacation. Because of my religious teaching, I registered for the draft at age 18 as a conscientious objector. I took the coursework to qualify as a dairy herd tester, approved by Selective Service, and as that was deemed by Selective Service as a interest to the nation because it improved agricultural efficiency. I rotated to 28 families every month. In other words, one family per day, every 28 families per month, taking samples of the milk produced by each cow, weighing it, testing it for butterfat content, weighing the amount of food consumed by each cow, calculating each cow's contribution and cost to the farmer. I had 3 Amish families on my circuit. I shared evening and morning meals with the family. At one family, I slept in a bed that was usually occupied by 3 boys. always wondered where in the world are those boys sleeping tonight, but I never found out. I had interesting discussions with the father of the house. One family had 11 children. The mother and the eldest daughter were serving the meal. The other children and father and I sat at the table, and those children didn't say a peep. They weren't nudging each other. They weren't punching each other. They weren't saying anything unless they were addressed. Well, in August of 1954, I took vacation to attend the first National Youth Conference, Anderson, Indiana. Some of you probably were there. But anyway, hey, Marie. I was thrilled to see Bob Richards, Church of the Brethren preacher called the pole vaulting parson. And he won 2 Olympic gold medals, one in Helsinki in 1952 and one in Melbourne in 1956. And at National Youth Conference, he gave us a demonstration.
It lasts longer
Wow.
than that.
Go ahead. Question?
Oh, sorry.
I was also impressed with the news about Brethren Volunteer Service. I had never heard about BVS. I had never heard of that opportunity before. Returning from Anderson, I immediately applied for a mission to BVS and I was accepted. I resigned my DHIA work and drove to New Windsor, Maryland, where I joined the 25th BVS unit, December 1, 1954. 1954, the 25th BVS unit. I must confess that had there not been a draft, I wouldn't have been a DHIA tester and I wouldn't have gone into BVS. But there was a draft and I did enter BVS, and what a blessing. It changed my life. I would have been a farmer for the rest of my life. And that would have been all right. The rest of my family primarily are. But anyway, during the eye-opening orientation weeks, we were told to list our 3 preferred projects for our 2-year assignment. I listed Europe, the Brethren Service farm in Falfurrias, Texas, and a project in California. I wanted to see some of the other parts of the world. I was assigned to be a guinea pig at National Institutes of Health, Bethesda, Maryland, and soon transferred to the Metabolic Research Unit of the University of Michigan Hospital in Ann Arbor. I was told that to be assigned to Europe, they wanted college people. If not a college degree, at least 1 year of college. And I looked at the other people in my unit that were assigned to Europe, and I thought to myself, they're no smarter than I am. Well, they do know some certain things about certain things that I don't know, but I know certain things about certain things that they, well, anyway, I accepted my assignment to medical research at NIH. I was only at NIH, a couple of weeks, and then I was transferred up to Michigan. And I missed the test that my colleagues at NIH told me about that occurred just after I left NIH. They were injected by an injection in the neck because whatever is being injected gets to the brain faster than it's injected lower in the body. And then for the next 48 hours, they are under one-to-one survey or scrutiny from a medical doctor to see what happened. My one colleague told me he just couldn't wait to get the worms out of his mouth because he just knew there were worms coming out of his gums, but he couldn't get them out of his mouth. I don't know what they had. I'm sure it was LSD, but I don't know for sure. But I didn't have that test. I had the hot room. I was dressed in rubber fisherman's waders up to my chest, a rubber raincoat, rubber gloves, and went into a room of 95 degrees with a 90% humidity. I had a wager on that I wouldn't pass out the first day because the previous BVSers had passed out. And when they came in to get them, they were unconscious. But anyway, I had figured I'll be okay. I got my magazines together and my books. I'll go in there and I'll read. I'll be okay. Well, I only read a little and I couldn't because the heat, evidently I couldn't read. And I kept, well, conscience anyway. And finally, when it came, it was getting toward the end of the day, I was to be there 8 hours. And I was looking at the clock. I steeled myself only to look at the clock every 15 minutes. And then I looked at the clock. It was about 10 feet away from me. And all of a sudden I couldn't see it. And I knew it was there, but I couldn't see it. And then I was frightened. Well, maybe I am going to pass out. And so I started saying, hi, Ed, because Ed was coming in to get me. And when he came in, I said, hi, Ed. And anyway, I won the wager. I didn't pass out. But anyway, that was the hot room. While en route to well, incidentally, I got another test. It was not 25% of the entire world's supply of a certain drug. I think it was aldosterone, but I was never told. But anyway, it would cost them $9,000. And it was 25% of the world's supply was the one test I was on. There was another, I better stop. Let's go on. While en route to annual conference in Grand Rapids, at the 1955 annual conference in Grand Rapids, Michigan, Ora Houston, who was responsible for BVS assignments, stopped into my room in Ann Arbor. While speaking about my project, he suddenly said, would you like to go to Europe? While speaking about my project, would you like to go to Europe? Dumbfounded, I sputtered, well, I would have to serve 2 years there, and I already have almost half of my service served, and I have an agreement with John Everly to serve my final year in New Windsor. And then I suddenly came to my senses. Of course I want to go to Europe. That was my original goal. I had tried my best for that, but I had failed. And then I accepted reality of a domestic assignment. I have often thought of the phrase, let go and let God. While researching for my book on Brethren service in the Elgin archives, I came across the book for my ticket to Europe. It cost $138 for my ticket from New York to Europe, $138 one way. That was a lot of money in 1955. And therefore I had to stay, of course, 2 years. I could tell you many stories of my experiences with Heifer Project, with the Don Murray Project on the island of Sardinia, Italy. I don't have time for that today. I discovered they needed a farm boy for an opening in Heifer Project, but I had to learn the German language and learn to type. Well, some of you have learned a foreign language. You know there are interesting occasions when learning a foreign language. For instance, after I had been in Europe for a couple of weeks, it was determined that I would, during that time I was learning German. And my director, Max Schneider, graduate of Manchester College, Max Schneider, who was the director of Heifer Project, took me, I was to be the visitation representative to visit families that had received a heifer a year before that. And I was to visit them as a contact between them and the donor family or Sunday school class or Rotary Club or whomever had donated the heifer in America. Well, Max took me on the road to show me what I was to do. And we went into Bavaria. And there, one evening, we went to visit a girl that I had met on the boat going across the water, across the Atlantic to Europe. I had met a returning exchange student. And so we went to visit her in Nuremberg. And she was going to a political meeting that evening of young people in a political meeting. And we were sitting at a long table. And there were two people between me and Max. Now the conversations were going on. And remember, I'd only been in Europe a couple of weeks. I didn't understand a lot of it. And I leaned over to look at Max and I said, "Ich habe das gemisst." in Brethren House, as we're learning German, we would put a G in front of, in other words, you goof, du husky goofed. We would put a G in front and use the English word. Well, I said, ich habe das gemisst. Well, the German students on both sides of the table snickered a little and arched their eyebrows, but fortunately I didn't repeat it. But that evening, going back to our room, Max said, you know what you just said? He said, do you remember what accumulates at the back end of a cow after she stands out of place for a certain time? The German word for manure is mist, M-I-S-T. Well, that was a vocabulary word I never forgot. But that's some of the things you run into when you're trying to learn a foreign language. One father of a family who received a heifer from the United States said to me, it takes a lot of love to give a cow away. On weekends, I would take American visitors to visit Brethren service projects like food and clothing distribution, student exchange, heifer recipient family, a visit down to Schwarzenau. And while in Europe, I was encouraged to go to college after BBS. A few college presidents urged me to come to their colleges. They gave me college catalogs to look at. As I would read them, I would go to my director in Castle House and ask for clarification. One day I told him, I come from a farm and I know all about BS, but what's this BA degree they're talking about? I didn't know anything about academics. One day while traveling in northern Germany, I stopped to read a historical sign along the road in memory of 10 million people who had lost their lives while refugees during the war. I knew millions had died as soldiers and as a result of warfare, but 10 million people died just trying to get away, trying to escape. I decided I wanted to know how a gutter rat like Adolf Hitler came to power in the most highly educated, the most highly cultured, to say nothing about Christian nation. I wrote home to my mother. I decided to go to college for a year to find out what caused that world war. She wrote back, we would be proud to have a college graduate in the family. And I thought, who said anything about graduating? I just want to go for a year to discover. She was a better prophet than I got hooked. Elizabethtown College, then Penn State, then hired at E-Town as instructor in European history. My slant on history was a bit different than most professors. I did not portray Napoleon, for instance, as a hero. I called him one of the arch villains in history. Some of you know that I have taken many tours to Europe and around the world, and that includes Paris. And in Paris, as I'm usually the guide in Europe, but when I go to Paris or Vienna or Berlin, London, I hire a city guide for a specialty in the city. And when the city guide in Paris and I were looking at our itinerary to show my people what the highlights of Paris, she mentioned Napoleon's tomb. And I said, no, we don't go to Napoleon's tomb. And she couldn't believe it. She was dumbfounded. But I said, I don't take my people, I don't expose them to honor a war criminal. And that was news to her. But anyway, Napoleon, as I see it, was the most powerful country, ruled the most powerful country, the most prosperous country in the world. No one dared attack France, but that wasn't good enough for old Boney, as the British called him. He was not satisfied with ruling the most powerful, the richest country in the world. He attacked his neighbors. He took coalitions of other nations to finally stop him. And after his defeat in Russia, someone suggested that if he had not been so aggressive and power hungry, over 500,000 men would not have been killed. What's 500,000 men to a man like me? Was his reply. This is a part of history that most professors do not mention, but my students heard about it. Anyway, 1964, I began my career as an instructor at Elizabethtown College in the heat of the Vietnam War. You remember when Richard Nixon and Henry Kissinger agreed to stop the bombing of North Vietnam over Christmas one year? Our daily newspaper carried every day a little front page square for our stores during December. 10 more shopping days till Christmas, they reminded us. 9 more shopping days till Christmas. 8 more shopping days till Christmas. Before students arrived in my classroom, I would write with big letters on the blackboard, 10 more bombing days till Christmas. 8 more bombing days till Christmas. And I would purposely leave it on the board so that the next class and instructor, as they entered the room, would be able to see the reminder of what our country was actually doing. We call ourselves a Christian nation. We celebrate the birth of the Prince of Peace by stopping the killing momentarily before we begin it again. I was asked to speak at one of our weekly chapel convocation sessions. My topic was United States and Vietnam from a historical viewpoint. I reviewed how for centuries Vietnam had been dominated and ruled by the Chinese, the French, the Japanese. After World War II, Ho Chi Minh who had studied in the United States, who had written a constitution for his country, was based primarily on our constitution. But now it appeared to most Vietnamese that the United States was just another foreign country trying to dominate them and prevent them from having their own independence. My speech was too long, far too long, but I said that we know why we are fighting them. We're told Ho Chi Minh was a communist, so we must kill him and his supporters. But we never mentioned why they are fighting us, the most powerful country in the world, ragged, shoeless people lugging supplies through the jungle in order to fight a country with unbelievable resources and firepower, including airplanes flying so high they cannot see or hear them. But they are bombed from that height. My speech was too long, but I tried to make a case from the point of view from the Vietnamese struggling and wishing for independence. After the speech, one of my fellow professors told me, "Great speech, Ken," but I would never have dared say it. Other colleagues were really upset. They said I was unpatriotic. If you borrow a copy of my autobiography from Marie, you can read it 55 years later. I'm not ashamed of what I said. It has stood the test of time. I came out publicly against the war before Walter Cronkite did. The next morning, as I entered campus, I saw a human-like figure swinging from a tree limb. The sign on it said, "Prof. Kreider." We brethren are not supposed to be proud, but I take satisfaction as being the only student, the only professor ever to have been hanged in the history of Elizabethtown College, in effigy, fortunately. I knew my message would be unpopular, but I hoped to drive the students to the library, if for no other reason to prove me wrong. They would learn a lot trying to do that. I've often told my students that there's no excuse for ignorance in the United States of America. Information is available. I had taken pains to be sure that everything I said could be documented, because if they found one falsehood, it would discredit the entire speech. A petition was circulated among the faculty to have me fired. I had no tenure, as I was in my 3rd semester of teaching. The president called me into his office, along with the chaplain who had scheduled my speech, and the chaplain hastened to say that he had scheduled a colonel from the Carlisle War College to come next month to give the other side. "No way!" Bringing his fist down on the desk with a loud thud, the president exclaimed, "No way! We've had enough controversy on this campus. Cancel the invitation." His phone had been ringing off the hook. One father said he would pull his child out of the college because of those commie professors. I thought that institutions of education were supposed to wrestle with controversial issues. My wife was concerned about a brick coming through our window at home. I received letters through the United States Mail Service addressed to Comrade Kreider with our correct address. The letters were unsigned. It was a rough time. But no one pointed out one thing that I said that was not true. During the years of the conflict in Vietnam, there were numerous public and anti-war demonstrations in Washington, D.C. I would charter a bus and take a load of college students, church members, community members to participate in the demonstration. I remember that each time, amid all those crowds, each time I would bump into Ken Brown, who had brought his combi load of students from Manchester College. I would tease him, asking, why didn't you have an entire busload? Why only a combi? I surely was glad to meet up with Ken. I'm sorry to have lost him. Early one morning, as I was checking the list of those holding reservations on our bus, when I called the name of a female student, there was no answer. I called again, no answer. Was she ill? Did she oversleep? Then another girl spoke up and said, she's not going along with us. I couldn't understand why. She had been one of the most enthusiastic students and leading the sign up of students as we were planning for this trip to Washington. I didn't understand what was wrong. I later learned that the previous night she had received a phone call from her father. You're not going with that commie professor to Washington tomorrow, are you? Well, yes, Daddy, I have a reserved seat on the bus. He told her that if she went to that demonstration, there would not be one more penny available for college room or board. That's clout. She didn't go. I'd love to have a talk with her today. One day as I exited the library, a young man addressed me on the steps of the library, said he wanted to stop by and say goodbye because the next day he's leaving for Canada. His draft number had come up and he said he could not participate in this illegal, this immoral war. What does one say when a student tells you he's forced to leave his home and his country? We held evening meetings. We had campus-wide teach-ins. We had peace marches through downtown Elizabethtown. Each fall, we would have a homecoming parade as part of a homecoming day for alumni and friends to come back to campus to meet old friends and classmates, teachers, professors. Our anti-war group made application for a float in the homecoming parade. Our application was denied. I managed to secure an old Army Jeep, open in the back like a pickup truck. Our children rode in the back of the Jeep with a huge sign calling for an end to the war. When the last parade float had passed, followed by the police car with his flashing red lights indicating the end of the parade, I pulled my Jeep right into line directly behind the police car. We were not in the parade, but we followed the parade with what I referred to as a police escort, gaily waving to the crowd and receiving considerable positive response. One day in 1969, after having finished my written exam the previous week, I passed my final verbal examination for my doctorate at Penn State. My professor and advisor, who had been a Fulbright professor, 1 year in Vienna, another in Helsinki, took me out for a celebrative lunch. And during the lunch, he told me that his son and his daughter and her husband are now living in Canada. I was surprised. He and his family did not have an Anabaptist background or association, but they could not participate in the killing and devastation in Vietnam. A few years ago, I had the opportunity to visit Vietnam, especially Saigon, Ho Chi Minh City. If these were normal times,
It's okay. He's just answering the phone. Uh-oh.
You'll probably have to bring him back, just like here, if you get a phone call while you're on Zoom, we lose you.
Ah,
So he might have to log back on.
okay.
Who knows how to do that?
Do you know how to do that, Dean?
Sounds a lot like Cliff Kindy.
Hmm. They know each other,
Yeah.
Ken and
Sure.
Cliff.
What about Cliff?
Will Ken realize what happened?
Probably.
Here
Here
he
he
is.
is.
There, there.
He's back.
You'll have to unmute, Ken.
Hey,
You're
Ken.
on mute.
Can't
There you
hear
go.
you.
Well, now can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Well, did you hear 5
Yep.
o'clock follow? Anyway, I made a point of that and taking pictures of Vietnamese people, the ladies sitting with their brown hats that we had seen during the war. It was very interesting. But anyway, it's the surrounding countryside. They would take you into holes in the ground where they would hide during the war. But anyway, what a tragedy lies just a few years behind this bustling scene today. A tragedy. Loss of over 1 million lives on the peninsula, destruction beyond description, tragedy for so many families in Vietnam and the United States, and reverberations that still continue today. Alienation from our government, not believing what the government tells us, separation of families, financial turmoil. Yes, BVS changed my life. A naive farm boy got an education. When I attended my first annual conference in Ocean Grove, New Jersey, it was 1954. Just a few months before I went to National Youth Conference in Anderson and before I joined BVS. But I attended my first annual conference in 1954 in Ocean Grove, and I learned for the first time in my life that not all brethren women wore prayer coverings. That was a shock. That's how sheltered we are here in Eastern Pennsylvania. But then I went to National Youth Conference, and I went to BVS. But I need to stop and give you time for comments and questions. I could, like I said, I could talk all day. But what are your questions? Comments?
What do you think your local church's reaction was, Mechanic Grove Church's reaction was to your being hung in effigy? Because that was on I think the front page of the Lancaster paper, if I remember right.
Well, I was living in E-Town.
Uh-huh.
I have at that time, about 20% of the Mechanic Grove Church were Kreiders at that time. But I can't answer your question, Ed. I don't know what they thought.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry.
I never heard anything at church about it. I heard it at home. We talked about it, but I thought, now that I look back on it, it would have been a good teaching time, but we didn't. I don't know that we used it as that. I don't know what the adult classes were doing, because at that time I would have been in junior high school. But I just kind of wondered if you had any feedback.
One of my first impressions of Mechanic Grove Church of the Brethren was as a child coming to church one morning, and the other children my age said, "Did you see the searchlights last night?" "What searchlights?" "Those searchlights." "What search?" "Well, the ones from the Fry farm." What do you mean?" "Well, they were Germans, and they're signaling to German submarines in the Atlantic Ocean. Didn't you see those They were members of our church. Yes, they were now citizens of the United States, but they had come here from Germany. And during the war at our church, the rumor, and incidentally, the children didn't formulate that rumor by themselves. They heard it from adults. That in southern Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, someone could see a searchlight from a German sub in the Atlantic Ocean. That was the hysteria that we had. even here in River City at Mechanic Grove, Church of the Brethren, talking about some of our own members, the Fry family, Frey, and their oldest son was Adolf Fry.
He just died.
What?
He just died.
He just died, yes.
Yeah.
Well, any other questions? Or you have enough of it for today? What time is it? Oh, I usually go long.
I'm curious about your experience with the, like the Iraqi war. Did you
Well,
demonstrate on some of the more recent exploits of our military?
I had a student stand up in class and offer me a one-way ticket to Moscow. And I said, thank you very much, but I've been to Moscow and I much prefer to live here. But I said, you should be thankful. When I was in Moscow, we had a young guide. He was a young, slim, tall, young man, about 19 years of age, attractive. He was intelligent. He could speak English. He was our guide, but he only could say what the government allowed him to say. I said, you as a student here at Elizabethtown College should be thankful that you get more than one point of view. Later on at the late part of the 20th century, as in 1998, I was offered a one-way ticket to Baghdad. And I said, thank you very much. I've been in Baghdad. I don't care to go back. I much prefer to live here. But again, you should be thankful for what you have. And we should use it to good use.
Ken.
Yes.
The guy with the umbrella.
Oh my wife reminds me. I was teaching English history one day, and I was talking about 1215 back at Runnymede, when the barons and the dukes of England finally told the King of England, Magna Carta, you're no longer the only boss. We also have a say. And about that time, the classroom door burst open, and one of my colleagues who was carrying an umbrella stuck an umbrella into my stomach and said, yes, but Professor Kreider, we have to be responsible. And he turned and walked out. Well, he must have, this was right after my speech, he must have thought I was talking about contemporary US. He was only 800 years out of line, plus out of line into my classroom. But those are some of the things that happened at each college. Oh, Carol. You had asked me to say something else. A story about.
He'd asked about Iraq.
Iraqi
Gary had
war
asked about
demonstration.
Iraq.
Oh yeah. Now I was offered a one-way ticket to Baghdad, and well, during that time I was no longer a professor. I retired in 1999. We've been blessed. We've had 22 years of retirement. I thought retirement was going to give me a lot of free time. What it gave me was flexible time.
What kind?
And we really appreciate that. I don't know what more to say about Iraq. We demonstrated against the war in Iraq in Lancaster in front of the courthouse, took my grandchildren along. We also took busloads to Washington during the Iraq war, but I did not have anything I can say much about on the campus because I was retired.
Speak
Okay.
What's he think of things today?
Is that enough, Marie?
Well, it's past 40 minutes. So if people are not having good questions, those were lots of helpful and interesting stories. And does Anyone want to ask another question or have something repeated? I did miss what the professors who heard your speech, was it at a Kiwanis Club or something, said to you right after that speech.
He said that was a great speech, but I would have never said it.
Oh, I would never have said it? Yeah.
That's
okay.
right.
How long did that effigy stay hanging?
I don't know. I don't know when it came down. I didn't take it down. I don't know.
Okay. But to be the only one, you're been with us all these years since then. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well,
How did that affect your children? Yeah, you said Carol was concerned that a brick might come through the window. How did it affect your children?
I don't remember that it affected them
They
much.
knew it was wrong.
They knew it was going on. They knew it was going on, but I don't think it of
It helped them
what.
it helped them politically as to how they think today.
Oh, it helped them politically as to how they think today. Thank goodness.
those who missed the early introduction, Ed here on our Timbercrest campus is a second cousin of Ken, and it was Ed's idea to set up this program, and we thank him for both of you for that. And we are hoping that there were a number of people who just kind of watched and listened, and we haven't seen them.
But it was Marie who twisted Ken's arm to get him to do it.
Ed and I have copies of Ken's autobiography, so if you're interested in more stories and some pictures, you may borrow our books. I've known Ken since I was in high school, and so that's a long time too, almost longer than John, than Ed's been around.
Who's speaking? I can't see.
Marie.
Marie is speaking.
All right.
Is Aline Crow?
No, Helene, that we talked about Helene. She is not there. Cliff Kendi, is Cliff Kendi around? I appreciated his article in the Messenger.
Yes, he's not, I don't think he's here, but he is in the area.
Tell him I appreciated his article.
When yes, we don't see him very often, but we can pass that along.
June and Carolyn see him more than we do.
Okay.
He's having a Sunday school class about the Potawatomis that were on our land where our church is right now. And so for Sunday school, we're learning more about Potawatomis.
All right.
What is that?
June and Carolyn see Cliff
I'm
more often.
I'm a supporter of the Christian peacemaking teams, which he is. And Peggy Gish and others are very involved. And Peggy Gish are very involved. Support them.
Did you have a question, Ron? Ken, I think I understood you to say, this is Ron Petrie. I understood you to say that you did not learn about BVS in your home congregation. And
That's
I was
correct.
curious about that. Since Mechanic Grove is in the heart of Brethranism, I was just curious as to why there was no word about BVS.
Our preacher was Rufus Bucher. Some of you may have heard of him. Great leader. He may have said it. I may not have heard it. You know, I was a young fellow in church. Maybe I wasn't paying attention. I never heard it. He had 3 of his sons went into the military.
Oh my goodness.
Like I say, I won't say that Rufus never preached it. I never heard it in Sunday school or in church. I'm sure there were a lot of things that I didn't hear.
But what you started, Ken, I think awakened the rest of your family, because Stan Bucher went to BVS, Everett Kreider, Gordon Griffith, I mean, you had a lot of cousins who followed
Yeah.
you a generation behind you, but
Yes.
who followed to go to BDS. I don't know if you influenced them, you know, maybe your actions influenced them. I don't know. But yeah, I agree. We did not hear that from the pulpit, even when Murray Wagner was the pastor there. So it is
Wow.
kind of interesting that
That is interesting.
we were interested in it and didn't know where to go with it.
Well, you've been very patient. Thank you very, very much for your attention. I think it worked out okay, but like I say, that's my first Zoom encounter. As me being on this side, we have
Thank
Zoom
you.
Sunday.
We'll see if we get feedback from anybody else that we don't see right now. And if possible, we'll work out an arrangement to have this message shown on our closed circuit TV at some point. So thank you all and good morning.
Thank you, Ken and
Thanks,
Carol.
Ken.
Bye. Bye.
Thank you.
Very good.
Goodbye.
We're leaving. Bye, Carol.